was born in 1912 in the old farmhouse on Route 124.
Okay, what brought you out to Wing Island?
Well, the Depression, there was a Great Depression on, and there was not any work, and people like that were graduating from college couldn't even get into the services, and the services only paid $21 a month at that time, and the budget was not set up for hiring many, so it must have been quite a blow to those people. But the rest of us, laboring type, there was not a bit of work because there wasn't a bit of money around. And so we were more or less brought up around the cranberries, and I was always interested in the cranberries. And when we had a chance to go over to the Wings Island and live over there for a couple of falls, we took it. The people that had the camp, the Black Duck Camp, which is made of driftwood and tar paper and things like that, had a little stove in it, and it used to be quite well off. They were in automotive, selling cars and stuff like that, and they made a decent living, and they, for enjoyment, they would come down and hunt ducks. So when we had the use of the building, we decided to go over there. We had only one vehicle between us, a Model T, and no money to mount anything for gas, but it seemed to be, and the bogs were only about a couple miles away. It seemed like the best thing we could do. So we, a friend offered to take us over by where this building is now, crossed over to the marsh. He was mechanical, and he had rigged up an outside door on the Model T, which was unheard of then. And he wanted to try it out in the muddy marsh. So we had just soon go across by punt, but anyway, we let him take us and our gear over to there. We got halfway in the mud puddle and rinsed off the outside door. But he kept going and got us over there. And we lugged the stuff across to the camp and set up housekeeping. So every day we'd go get in the punt across from the camp to Paynes Creek landing and go cranberrying. Of course, there wasn't much market for the cranberries, and they never were very high in those days anyway, because cranberries are a luxury product, and people don't buy it unless they're affluent. They buy meat and potatoes to live on, but they don't buy cranberries. But anyway, I had this dream of raising them, even though the bankers all would never loan a cent on cranberries because they claimed that the cranberry growers were the biggest gamblers of all. There's too much frost, bugs, and everything else, but it didn't deter me from being interested and wanted to beat the game. So, of course, when the Depression came, everything went even downhill more. Now, we never got paid for the berries that we picked until after they were sold, and so there was a big shortage of money. We had just barely enough to get the gas. So anyway, we made out quite well. For bathing, we had the Paynes Creek in front of us and Quivett Creek in back of us and the bay on the side of us. So we had plenty. We always went swimming over to Quivett because we didn't have suits with us. And on Paynes Creek, sometimes there would be visitors and people come down looking at the scenery. So, but out the backyard, about a little bit further, but not far, to go to Quivett Creek and swimming. So, in the evenings, the other two boys smoked. Of course, they didn't have any money for cigarettes, so they got the urge to go to town, and bum cigarettes from somebody if they could. So I stayed there and kept the fire going.
So what did Wing Island look like in those days?
Wing Island looked altogether different. There wasn't hardly a tree on it, but but there were hundreds of the beach plums which scattered all over. And so it's altogether, Wings Island's altogether different now. It's all grown up with this poison ivy and all the stuff nature's taken over. But in those days, you could look almost clearly across it. One time we got a job with the town trying to kill off the gypsies. The gypsies moths loved to nest in those beach plums. And of course there was very little money, but it was some money. And you'd always have trouble because with creosote you'd put on a paintbrush, and paintbrush you'd put on a pole and reach up and get all the, so the beach plums were low, but they were gnarly, as you probably know, they were gnarly, but we could go all around the outside. But the trouble was, of course, the creosote, no matter how careful you are with it, you get it on your car, and you have to finish your own car, no portal pay or anything like that, only just the hours worked. But that was, but we did that, and we did most everything. We dug clams, we dug razorfish, and we'd go to work each morning on the punt over to the landing. The landing was a little bit different in those days. The parking lot was nearer the bank. The bank, the bluff was there, and the parking was in front. And there's a little side creek off of the main creek, and there was a little rustic bridge over it that you go over. In other words, it was back a eighth of a mile back from where it is now. You can't drive right up and look down the water, but just a short distance. And we'd take that punt, of course, and go across. And then in the morning we'd come back and go over there.
Who owned Wing Island?
Wing Island was owned by various people that had relatives that went way back to the salt works. And so in my career I met an awful lot of people and have said, oh yes, we owned a part of Wings Island. But anyway, the town finally decided to take it, eminent domain, and they paid off all people that had a decent claim, I guess. And so it belongs to the town now.
Was there any evidence of the salt works on the island when you were living there?
There wasn't any evidence of the salt works on the islands then. But we could see that they had where they put the plaque of Mr. Wing out in back. As we went with this vehicle, we could see what looked like to be a dump heap, which in those days they threw everything out back and they didn't bother to bury it too deep. There's plenty of land, and so I thought at the time that if I was a person interested in digging up artifacts, that would be a lovely place to work. And but of course we had to live in Jamaica and we couldn't mess around with that. Then, since then, Mr. Hay or someone has mentioned in their books that they had seen that.
What kind of sportsmen used to go out to Wing Island?
Well, the duck hunters were really relatives of the fellow that had this camp, and they would come down and shoot ducks on their vacation, or try to shoot the ducks. They didn't shoot right from the black duck camp that we lived in, but just over the dune, they dig a depression on the beach and put a lot of hay and grass around to camouflage it so the ducks wouldn't see them. And that's where they would shoot from there. But I say, when the depression came, all frivolous stuff like that was knocked in the head.
Did Elmer Kroll, the bird carver, carve decoys for those people?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of.
One time you mentioned a story about jackrabbits on the island.
Yes, one time the state, the game, wildlife game people thought it would be a good idea to bring some of the big jackrabbits that I think they got them from Maine and put them locally, see if they would thrive. And so they did, and they put them first over Wings Island. It was a good place for them. They could scurry around and in under the beach plums and be pretty safe. But near the end of it, when we were short of food, one day we were able to, I was able to gather in one of the big jackrabbits, which we lived on for a couple of days. It was quite a funny episode because the gunners were upwind and they drove the rabbit down, and when I heard the gunshots, I ran out onto the beach with my 12-gauge single-shot gun and saw these two gunners, and an animal came over the dune and came down the beach toward me. So I ran out with a gun and headed it off, and it darted behind the building. And I let a blast go and hit the building, didn't get the rabbit. And then I was running and trying to put in the shells, a single shot, 12 gauge, and hit the other corner of the building. I still didn't get him. I finally got him about the third or fourth shot, but it was the funniest thing. It's a good thing there wasn't someone taking pictures. That'd be the funniest thing, yeah. And then also, right toward the end also, we had permission to go out Mr. Young's weir. If there was any fish left in there, we could have it because he was slow in getting his netting off for the winter. There was a big bass in there. So we ate off of that for 2 days, I guess.
So did you, when you were out on the island, were there many visitors? Like, what type of people would go out there? Did people go for picnics?
The kind of people that went out on the island were nil. There was no one but us. No one went out to the island.
Did they dig the ditches in the salt marsh during that period of time?
No, that was...
Mosquitoes?
No, that was, I believe that was, they dug this later. The mosquito ditches were dug later when they found that they could improve it by digging keeping the water moving in and out of the ditches.
Have there been any forest fires on Wing Island that you know of?
None of no fires on the island that I know of. We were the only ones there, well, that period of time, and so there wouldn't be any fires. We were very careful.
So when you were there were no fences or buildings or anything left?
When we were there were no buildings, no remnant left, except the dump heap of, I believe, of the wings. In those days, a lot of people, a fair amount of people, depending on game to help their living. They have little truck gardens, and they get either ducks or rabbits or something, and it was the normal affair. Of course, now a lot of people are against all the killing and all the shooting and all that stuff that was taken for granted in those days helped people survive. And of course, some of the islands now, like over in, I think it was the islands off of Portugal, when we were there, and they still do that. Have a little garden, a few potatoes, a little stuff, and a few chickens and an animal for the milk, and it's part of the way they live. And it used to be that way here, but now it's all a different ballgame.
Who owned the cranberry bogs, and where were they located? The ones that you worked on?
Well, do you know? You must know the cranberry bogs were owned by the grandfather of the Eddy sisters. You know the Eddy sisters? Well, their grandfather owned the bogs, and he was quite, I never met him because he died just before, and his widow handled all the financial part of it while we were there. But he rigged up from Cobb's Pond a flume, wooden flume, going toward the lower road, and then a tile under the road, and there was a string of bogs that went from there toward the swamp road, which is a long distance up, and that was all cranberry bogs. It's nothing but a mess now. So it was quite something. I don't know. He was an engineer anyway, I believe. I believe he worked for one of those big outfits in Boston. But so that's where the cranberry operation itself, the screen house, was just beyond. You know where the Eddy girls live now? Well, it was just about 1,000 feet going toward the cemetery. It's all grown up now. You can't see a sign of the building, but there was a red building there, and quite long, like 2-story. And so the cranberries, when we brought the crop in from the bogs, you go up around the back and store them upstairs. That's the typical cranberry house of those days. Then you had gravity feed to lower them down to the screeners down below. And one time I pitched my tent out back, and so I'd be nearer the works. We had no money for gas or no vehicles and stuff like that, and it was a big problem, bicycles. But so when I pitched the tent out back of the screen house, a little ways out in back, I noticed this pronounced path, and I couldn't understand why there'd be a path there. I couldn't figure that out. But I was smart enough not to put my tent across it. I put it to the side. So the next morning I woke up, and there was all these faces staring at me. The lady that made that path had gone for every day at daylight from her home to the farm to take care of the farm animals. So of course I didn't know that. And so when she came along and just break of day and saw me there in the tent, she thought I was dead. And she went into hysterics. She ran home, all the way home. She was a heavy woman, and they couldn't understand what she was talking about because she couldn't get the words out. She was bawling so hard. I don't think I ever had anybody cry over me the way she did. I felt, she really cared, Thought I was dead. And by the time the men of the house could get the words out of her, she said, "Washy's dead." "What are you talking about?" "Washy is dead. I saw him. He's white-faced. He's dead, and he's gone." And so they went up there, and that's when I woke up. Everybody staring at me, thinking I was dead. But we had quite a few experiences there. And because my main job at the screen house was heading out, filling the boxes. The women would pick out the poor ones. They'd go into quarter-barrel boxes, and then I would head them up, put on the label where they were to go. They always went to either Faneuil Hall, Boston, or New York, or Philadelphia. And when they got there, commission agent would take them and sell them, and then he'd send you a check. He'd take out 10% commission, and it worked out fine. You would think they'd be a mess up, but it worked out fine. And of course, they shipped them by train, and over at the Brewster station, they'd always have a freight car waiting on the siding, and it would hold about 600 of those cases. Now, a lot of people didn't have 600 cases, but they might have 50 cases. Other fellow might have 100 cases. But I always marveled that they didn't have trouble sorting them out, but they never did. They'd go in and freight would haul them out at nighttime, Boston or New York, and it worked out very fine.
Other than out on the flats where the fish weirs were there any packet landings in operation or anything when you landed on the island?
No. The sailing had gone with the train was everything then. Mr. Young owned the camp, and the people that had used it before during the affluent time were his sons, so it's sort of a family affair. And this friend, a buddy of ours, about the same age, was a grandson. And so the grandson and my brother and myself was the trio that went over there. And the offer was too good to refuse. It was near the work, and we, between the three of us, we only had one Model T, and that was pretty well whipped touring car.